Be Me Dominic, 29. I have a small workshop where I restore old furniture. It's a quiet life. I work with my hands, I set my own hours, and I answer to no one. My place is small, just enough for me. The smell of wood stain and varnish is my version of peace. I'm not rich, but I'm comfortable. I paid off my truck, I own my tools, and I don't owe anyone a damn thing. This simple existence is something I've worked hard to build. It's a fortress of solitude, and I'm the king of a very small, quiet castle. But every fortress has a weakness. Mine is the mandatory family dinner. It happens once a month, sometimes more if there's a birthday or a holiday. It's always at my parents' house. The cast of characters never changes. There's my dad, Joe. A good man, but beaten down by decades of psychological warfare he didn't even know he was fighting. He's a master of the strategic retreat, usually into the newspaper or a plate of food. Then there's my aunt, Zoe, my mom's sister and professional echo chamber. She doesn't have opinions of her own, just slightly less articulate versions of my mother's. And then there's my mother, Anne. My mom lives her life through a screen. Her identity is forged in the fires of online comment sections and private social media groups. She's a self-proclaimed feminist warrior fighting the great battles of our time from her ergonomic office chair. Every dinner starts the same way, a 30-minute monologue about some injustice she read about. Some CEO said something mildly inappropriate in an interview from 2003, and now she's calling for a boycott. Some movie didn't have enough powerful female characters, so it's a tool of the patriarchy. I learned a long time ago not to engage. I just nod, chew my food, and focus on the texture of the mashed potatoes. Dad has perfected the art of looking interested, while his mind is clearly on the History Channel documentary he's missing. Aunt Zoe just chirps in with, "You're so right, Anne," and "That's just terrible" at regular intervals. So this particular dinner, a few months back, started just like any other. It was a Sunday evening, I think, the kind where you can already feel Monday looming. Mom was on a roll about toxic masculinity in the workplace. Apparently, a guy at her friend's office held a door open for a female colleague, and it was interpreted as a microaggression. I'm pretty sure I heard this exact story before, but with different characters. I was halfway through my chicken when she finally paused, took a sip of wine, and turned her sights on me. The predator had acquired its target. "Dominic, honey," she started, with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. I was talking to Carol from my book club the other day. I braced myself. Nothing good ever comes after that sentence. Her daughter, Melissa, is back in town. She's such a wonderful girl, very bright, very aware. She thinks men who show their emotions are incredibly brave. I just kept cutting my chicken. Slow, deliberate cuts. I was thinking you two would have so much to talk about. I could give you her number. I put down my fork and knife, wiped my mouth, and looked at her. "No thanks, Mom. I'm not interested." The smile flickered for a second. "Don't be silly. It's not a commitment. Just a coffee. You need to get out more." "I get out plenty," I said, keeping my voice even. "I'm just not looking to date anyone right now." This was the point of no return. I knew it, but I was tired of the endless probing, the constant setups. I decided to pull the pin on the grenade and end it. Actually, I'm not planning on dating at all. I don't think I'll get married or have kids. A silence fell over the table. It was so complete, you could hear the hum of the refrigerator. My dad froze with his fork halfway to his mouth, his eyes wide. Aunt Zoe looked back and forth between me and my mother, like she was watching a tennis match and didn't know who to root for. My mother's face went through a remarkable transformation. The fake, pleasant smile dissolved. Her lips thinned into a hard line. Her eyes, which had been lazily scanning me, were now laser-focused. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. What did you just say? Her voice was low, dangerously calm. I said I don't plan on getting married or having kids, I repeated, not backing down. It's not the life I want. For a solid 10 seconds, she just stared at me. I could see the gears turning in her head, processing this information, trying to fit it into her worldview and failing. Then the eruption. It wasn't loud shouting. Not at first. It was worse. It was a cold, venomous hiss. So that's it? You're just going to give up? It's not giving up, Mom. It's a choice. A choice? She laughed. But it was a sharp, ugly sound. It's fear is what it is. You're afraid of strong, independent women. You're afraid of a real partnership because it would challenge your fragile male ego. I just sat there, watching her. It was fascinating, in a horrifying way. All that time you spend alone in that dusty workshop, it's not healthy. You've been poisoned by that online nonsense. You're letting toxic masculinity dictate your life, making you think that being alone is some kind of virtue. And then came the pivot, the part that I knew was coming. In the very next breath, her progressive feminist argument twisted into the most ancient traditional demand a mother can make. And what about me? What about this family? Is it too much to ask for a grandchild? Do you have any idea how selfish you're being? I have a right to be a grandmother. It's a natural part of life. I almost laughed. The hypocrisy was so thick you could cut it with a knife. 1 minute, I'm a victim of toxic masculinity for wanting to be alone. The next, I'm a selfish monster for not performing my biological duty to provide her with a baby. My dad cleared his throat. Anne, maybe we should... You stay out of this, Joe, she snapped, not even looking at him. This is your fault, too. You never taught him how to be a real man. My dad recoiled as if he'd been slapped. He slowly put his fork down and retreated back into his silence. I felt a surge of anger on his behalf, but I kept my cool. Getting angry would just give her ammunition. This has nothing to do with Dad, I said. This is my decision. A decision you're going to regret, she said, her voice trembling with rage. You'll end up a lonely, bitter old man, and it will be your own damn fault. I stood up from the table. I'm sorry you feel that way. Thanks for dinner. I walked out of the dining room, grabbed my jacket from the hook, and headed for the door. I could hear her still talking as I left, her voice rising in pitch, a mix of fury and disbelief. The drive home was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the sound of my truck's engine. I wasn't sad or even that angry. Mostly, I just felt a profound sense of weariness. The Great War, as I started calling it in my head, had begun. The next morning, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my mother. Not an apology, of course. It was a link to an article. The headline was something like, "The Unspoken Crisis: How Male Loneliness is a Public Health Emergency." I read the first paragraph. It was full of buzzwords about men being unable to form emotional connections due to societal pressure. I deleted the message. An hour later, another one. This time, an article titled, "Why Modern Women Don't Need a Man, but Men Desperately Need a Woman." I deleted that one, too. This went on for days. It became a sort of morning ritual. Wake up, make coffee, delete the psychological warfare my mother was sending me. There were articles about the benefits of marriage for men's mental health. There were blog posts about men who regretted not having children. There were think pieces about how choosing solitude was a symptom of unresolved childhood trauma. She was trying to build a narrative, a cage of intellectual-sounding arguments to trap me in. She wanted me to believe that my own choice wasn't mine at all, but a sickness that she, the enlightened one, could cure. After about a week of this, I just archived her chat. The messages still came, but at least I didn't have to see the notifications. When the digital carpet bombing failed, she moved on to phase 2. The ambush. It happened on a Saturday. I was in my workshop, carefully sanding down a 1920s oak dresser. My phone rang. It was her. I let it go to voicemail, but she immediately called back. I knew if I didn't answer, she might just show up at my door. I sighed and picked up. "Hello?" "Dominic, thank God you answered," she said, her voice dripping with fake urgency. "I need your help. My car won't start. The battery must be dead. Could you come give me a jump?" I knew it was a lie. Her car was barely 2 years old. "Can't you call AAK?" I asked. "You pay for the membership." "Oh, it'll take them forever. You're so much closer. Please, honey, I'm stranded." Stranded in her own garage. Right. But I knew arguing was pointless. It was easier to just go and get it over with. "Fine. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I packed up my tools, got in my truck, and drove over. When I pulled into their driveway, I saw her standing on the porch, waving. And she wasn't alone. Standing next to her was a woman who looked to be about my age. She had that specific look, the kind of person who lists their pronouns in their email signature. Short, asymmetrical haircut with a streak of purple, oversized glasses, and a t-shirt with some political slogan on it. "Dominic, you're a lifesaver," my mom chirped as I walked up. "Look who was just dropping by. This is Melissa. I think I told you about her." Melissa gave me a tight, analytical smile, the kind of smile a scientist gives a lab rat. "So, you're the famous furniture guy," she said. Her voice had a vocal fry that could strip paint. "Something like that," I replied, looking at my mom. "So, the car?" "Oh, right," Mom said, feigning surprise as if she'd completely forgotten. "It's in the garage. But first, why don't you two talk for a minute? Melissa was just telling me about the oppressive nature of the modern dating landscape for women. I was being set up. It was so obvious and clumsy, it was almost insulting." Melissa launched into a pre-rehearsed speech. It was a torrent of academic jargon about emotional labor, weaponized incompetence, and the patriarchal structures inherent in traditional courtship. I just stood there, nodding occasionally, my eyes glazed over. I felt like an anthropologist observing a strange alien ritual. After a few minutes of this, she finally paused and looked at me expectantly. "It's a real minefield out there," she concluded. "Men have to be willing to do the work to deconstruct their own privilege." "Sounds tough," I said, my voice completely flat. My mom was beaming, as if this was the most stimulating conversation in history. "Well," I said, clapping my hands together, "car battery's not going to jump itself." I walked past them towards the garage. My mom's smile faltered. I opened the garage door. Her car was parked inside. I popped the hood. I reached in and gave the battery terminal a little jiggle. It was loose. That's all it was. I tightened it with my hand, closed the hood, and said, "Try it now." My mom got in, turned the key, and the engine purred to life instantly. She looked stunned. "Oh, well, I guess it just needed a man's touch." Melissa, who had followed us into the garage, visibly cringed at that phrase. I saw the ideological short circuit happening in her brain. It was hilarious. "It wasn't a man's touch," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "It was just a loose connection. Anyone could have fixed it." I turned to leave. "Nice meeting you, Melissa." I didn't wait for a reply. I just got in my truck and drove away, leaving them standing there in the awkward silence of a failed mission. That night, the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't a setup. It was Phase 3, emotional blackmail. I answered, and was immediately met with the sound of my mother crying. It wasn't loud, theatrical sobbing. It was the quiet, choked-up kind, engineered for maximum guilt. "I just don't understand what I did wrong," she whispered into the phone. I stayed silent. "I try so hard to give you everything. I just want you to be happy, and you throw it back in my face." "Mom, I am happy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "No, you're not. Happy people don't hide from the world. They connect. They build families. All my friends, their kids are getting married, having babies. What do I get to talk about? My son's collection of antique chairs?" The venom was back, just under the surface of the fake tears. "I'm embarrassed, Dominic. I'm embarrassed that my son is choosing to be a failure." That word hit me. Failure. Because I didn't want the same things she wanted for me, I was a failure. My business, my independence, my peace of mind, none of it mattered. The only metric for success was whether or not I produced a grandchild for her to show off at her book club. "If that's how you see it, then I don't think we have anything more to talk about," I said. "So, you're hanging up on your mother now? After all I've done for you? Good night, Mom." I ended the call and turned my phone off. I went into my workshop. The oak dresser was sitting there, gleaming under the overhead light. I ran my hand over the smooth, finished wood. I had taken something old and broken, something someone else had given up on, and I had made it whole again. I had given it a new life. It was solid. It was real. And it was then that I truly understood. It wasn't about me. It was never about my happiness. It was about her. Her identity was a carefully constructed house of cards. On one side, she was the progressive feminist mom who had raised a woke son. On the other side, she was a traditional woman who craved the social status that came with being a grandmother. My choice, my simple, quiet decision to live my life on my own terms, didn't just challenge her. It took a bulldozer to her entire house of cards. If I chose not to marry, she couldn't brag about the strong, independent woman I had partnered with. If I chose not to have kids, she couldn't post endless photos of her grandchild on social media with captions about the future being female. I was robbing her of her two most valuable assets, her social narrative and her bragging rights. My existence as a contented, single, child-free man was an inconvenient truth that shattered her entire self-image, and she couldn't stand it. Understanding that changed everything. The guilt she was trying to pile on me just slid right off. It wasn't my burden to carry. It was her own hypocrisy, and she was choking on it. A few weeks passed in relative peace. I kept her chat archived. I didn't answer unknown numbers. I thought maybe, just maybe, she had given up. Then I got a text from my dad. "Don't forget, my birthday dinner is this Saturday. It would mean a lot to me if you came." I stared at the message for a long time. My first instinct was to say no, to make an excuse. I knew it was going to be another ambush, but this time, it wouldn't be just me, my mom, and some random activist. It would be the whole extended family, a public trial. But it was for my dad, the one person who had never demanded anything from me, the guy who just wanted his son to be there for his birthday. Against my better judgment, I texted back, "I'll be there." I had just agreed to walk straight into the lion's den, but this time, I wasn't going in unprepared. The Saturday of my dad's birthday party arrived with a sense of inevitability. I spent the morning in my workshop applying the final coat of oil to a beautiful cherry wood table. The rhythmic motion of rubbing the oil into the grain was calming. It was a process of revealing, not changing. The beauty was already there. My job was just to bring it out. I thought about the evening ahead. I wasn't nervous. The fear and guilt were gone, replaced by a cold, clear sense of purpose. I wasn't going there to fight. I wasn't going there to win an argument. I was going there to end one. The strategy was simple. Don't defend my position. Make her defend hers. Her ideology was her sword and shield. I was going to show her, and everyone else, that it was made of glass. I finished my work, cleaned up, and got ready. I picked up the gift I had for my dad. It was a first edition book by his favorite military historian, something I'd tracked down online a while ago. It was a gift from a son to his father. Nothing more, nothing less. Driving over, I felt strangely calm. It was the same route I always took, but it felt different. It felt like the last time I would be making this journey under the old rules. When I pulled up, the house was already full of cars. The whole clan was here. I took a deep breath before I got out of the truck. Not for courage, but just to center myself. I walked up the path and let myself in. The noise of a family gathering hit me immediately. Laughter, chatter, the clinking of glasses. I saw my dad across the room, talking to my uncle. His face lit up when he saw me. I navigated through the clusters of relatives, offering polite nods and hellos. "Dominic, glad you could make it," my dad said, shaking my hand and pulling me into a brief, awkward hug. Men in my family aren't big on physical affection. "Happy birthday, Dad." I handed him the wrapped gift. He looked at it, surprised. "You shouldn't have." "Just open it later," I said. From across the room, I saw my mother watching me. She was holding court with my Aunt Zoe and a few female cousins. She gave me a bright, brittle smile and a little wave. It was a performance for the audience. "See? We're a happy, normal family. There is no conflict here." I just gave a small nod in return and turned my attention back to my dad. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. Everyone there knew about the situation. I could feel the sideways glances. I could hear the whispers that stopped when I got too close. My cousins were polite but distant. My uncles clapped me on the shoulder but didn't engage in any real conversation. I was the variable, the problem child, the one who was rocking the boat. I found a corner, got myself a bottle of water, and just observed. My mother was playing the role of the perfect hostess. She floated from group to group, laughing, refilling drinks, making sure everyone was comfortable. But I could see the tightness around her eyes. I could see the way her gaze kept flicking back to me, checking my position, assessing my mood. She was a general surveying the battlefield before the main engagement. Dinner was called, and we all found our seats around the large, extended dining table. I was seated strategically between a great-aunt who was mostly deaf and a cousin's husband I barely knew. It was social Siberia. The meal began. The conversation was stilted, full of safe, boring topics. The weather, a recent sports game, someone's kitchen renovation. My mother, from her position at the head of the table opposite my father, tried to steer the conversation. "Did you hear about Sarah's youngest?" she announced to the table. "He and his wife are expecting their second, a little girl this time. They're just so thrilled." She looked down the table in my direction. I ignored it, focusing on my plate. A few minutes later, another attempt. "It's just wonderful to see the family growing. It's the most important thing in life, isn't it? Leaving a legacy." This time, a few people mumbled in agreement. The trap was being set, the ground being prepared. I continued to eat my food. I made small talk with the cousin's husband about his job and logistics. It was mind-numbingly dull, but it was safe. My refusal to engage was clearly infuriating her. Her cheerfulness was becoming more and more strained. Finally, the plates were cleared, and dessert was served. Coffee was poured. This was the moment, the main event. My mother stood up, tapping her wineglass with a fork. The room fell silent. "I'd like to propose a toast," she began, beaming at my father. "To my wonderful husband, Joe, 65 years old and still the most patient man I know." A few people chuckled. She talked about their life together, their early years, the challenges they faced. It was a good speech, polished and well-rehearsed. I knew the pivot was coming. "We've built a wonderful life, a wonderful family. Our greatest joy has been watching our son grow." She turned her head and looked directly at me. Every eye at the table followed her gaze. The spotlight was on. "Family is everything," she continued, her voice taking on a more serious, preachy tone. "It's about carrying on traditions, about supporting each other, about the legacy we build for the future. It's a duty we all have." "And so," she said, raising her glass higher, "my birthday wish for my husband is that our son, Dominic, will finally understand that he'll find it in his heart to grow up, to stop thinking only of himself, and to embrace the responsibilities of being a man and a member of this family." She finished, "To family." A few people weakly echoed "to family" and took a sip of their wine, but most just sat there in a state of profound awkwardness. The silence was deafening. She had just publicly called me an immature, selfish child in front of 24 relatives. She remained standing, looking at me, a triumphant, challenging glint in her eye. She expected me to crumble, to get angry, to yell, to make a scene and prove her right. I did none of those things. I calmly placed my fork on my dessert plate. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water. I looked at my dad, who was staring at his plate, his face a mask of misery. Then I looked back at my mother, and I slowly, calmly stood up. I didn't pick up a glass. I just rested my hands on the table in front of me. "Thank you, Mom," I said, my voice even and clear, carrying across the silent room. That was quite a speech. I let that hang in the air for a second. Since we're speaking of wishes and family values, I think it's a good time to clear something up. I looked around the table, making eye contact with a few of my aunts and uncles. My mother has spent my entire life teaching me a certain set of values. I was raised to believe in them, and I do. I turned my full attention back to her. "You taught me that a woman's body is her own, that she, and she alone, has the right to choose what she does with it, that no one, not society, not the government, not her family, has the right to tell her if or when she should have a child. Do you still believe that?" She was thrown off balance. This wasn't the script she had prepared for. "Well, yes, of course," she stammered. "But what does that have to do with—" "I'm not finished," I said, my voice still calm, but with an edge of steel that cut her off. "You taught me that traditional gender roles are a cage, that it's wrong to tell a woman her only value is as a wife and mother. You taught me that the patriarchy forces people into boxes they don't belong in, and that true freedom is the right to define your own life and your own happiness. Do you still believe that?" Her face was starting to pale. She saw where this was going. She had walked straight into it. "Yes," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Good," I said. "I'm glad we're on the same page, because I believe in those things too. I believe every person has the right to choose their own path. So, please, explain it to me. Explain to me and to everyone here why my body is not my own. Explain why I don't have the right to choose what I do with my life. Explain why you feel you have the right to demand a grandchild from me, as if my only purpose, my only value as a man, is to be a stud horse to carry on the family name." The room was so quiet, I could hear the clock ticking on the mantelpiece. You stand there and you talk about duty and responsibility, the exact same words you've condemned when they are used to pressure women. You attack the idea of traditional roles, yet you are demanding that I fulfill the most traditional male role of all. I leaned forward slightly. "Your feminism, it seems, is a one-way street. It's freedom for you, but a cage for me. It's a weapon you use to get what you want. You don't want a partner for me. You don't care about my happiness. You want a baby. You want a status symbol, and you are willing to publicly humiliate your own son to try and get it." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. I am not a failure. I am not selfish. I am simply living by the very values you claim to hold so dear. The only hypocrisy at this table is yours. I straightened up. "So, my wish for my father on his birthday is that he gets to enjoy the rest of his evening in peace." I looked at my dad. For the first time in years, I saw a flicker of something other than resignation in his eyes. It was pride. He gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. I pushed my chair in. "Thank you all for the dinner. Dad, I'll call you tomorrow." And with that, I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't run. I walked at a normal pace through the living room, grabbed my jacket, and let myself out the front door. No one said a word. No one tried to stop me. The cool night air felt amazing on my face. I got in my truck and sat there for a minute in the darkness. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of a battle finally fought and won. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb. In my rearview mirror, I could see the warm lights of the house, a little diorama of a family frozen in the fallout of a truth bomb. The drive home was a blur. When I got back to my apartment, the silence was a welcome friend. I walked into my workshop. The cherry wood table was waiting for me. Solid, real, uncomplicated. My phone buzzed on the workbench. I thought about ignoring it, but I picked it up. It was a text message from my dad. 3 words. "I am proud." That was it. That was everything. I didn't hear from my mother for a long time after that. Weeks turned into months. My Aunt Zoe tried calling once or twice, but the conversations were short and awkward. She didn't know what to say without her sister's script. I heard through the grapevine that my mother told everyone I was going through a difficult phase, that I had issues I needed to work through. She had to create a new narrative to save face. It was the only way she knew how to operate. It didn't bother me. Her words had no more power. My relationship with my dad changed. It wasn't a big, dramatic shift. It was small things. He started calling me once a week just to chat. He came by the workshop one afternoon to see what I was working on. We didn't talk about that night. We didn't have to. An understanding had been reached. A quiet alliance had been formed. It's been about a year now. Life is quiet. I go to work. I build things. I read. I see my dad for lunch every couple of weeks. A few nights ago, I was sitting in my living room. I was in a chair I had restored myself, a big, comfortable leather armchair from the 1940s. I was drinking a glass of whiskey and listening to the rain fall outside. And it struck me. I wasn't lonely. I was peaceful. I hadn't chosen a life of solitude because I was afraid of women, or angry, or broken. I had chosen it because it was my own. I had built a life, just like I build furniture, based on solid principles: honesty, integrity, and peace. My mother wanted me to build a family to complete her picture, but I realized I had already built my own legacy. It was in the grain of the wood under my hand. It was in the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. It was in the simple, unshakable truth of a life lived on my own terms, and that was more than enough.